Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to probably wait a few minutes to do introductions, and we're going to switch the schedule just a little bit. So we're actually going to start off with the map of the month first. Um, so we'll have Jesse Freshman from EGRC come up and do the map for the month. Bert Gramberg is in the Philippines right now on vacation. So that's why he's not responding if anyone's trying to get a hold of him. But he's in the Philippines for 2 weeks, so we will miss him while he's gone. So yeah, we're just going to go right into the map of the month, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
So for both maps of the month, for November and December, we looked back over the last 4 to 5 years and all the data we had collected, and we looked at how things had improved. So the first thing we did last month is we took data on different measures such as maximum advertised speed, LTE coverage, different technologies in different places, and how many providers are in the same spot. And we kind of rolled those up into different scores for each category. And how we did that is detailed in the blog post, so I won't go super into that. But then what we did is we gave the state an overall score, so we weighted the different factors differently. So we weighted speeds the most because I think that makes the most sense. What speed that people getting that care about most. And we also weighted LTE pretty high. I think it's pretty cool because LTE and speeds have increased a lot over the last few years. And you can see that on the graph. So it's kind of cool because it gives the state like an overall score about the broadband landscape, kind of weighting things that we find are important. And you can see how things have improved in Utah. It's kind of simple. It's not a map. But are there any questions on that? I want to work pretty fast. But there's a lot in there. I encourage you to read the blog post. And it talks about, because I mean there's a lot of numbers and stuff that went into this that I think is The next one we did was we actually updated a map of the month that we did about a year ago. And for this one, we took, for every populated place with the Census Bureau recognized, we took the maximum advertised residential speed for that place. And we looked at it in fall 2010, and then we looked at it in fall 2014, and we mapped the difference. So we split that up by fixed and mobile availability. So this is the fixed map. And fixed is things that you get, usually that's your home connection. You can get it over cable, DSL, fixed wireless. So this map shows areas in the state that have increased a lot. Rural Utah, the bigger the dot and the darker the dot, the more space has increased. You can tell in rural Utah, space has increased a lot. You can also notice, like here, Salt Lake Valley hasn't really increased that much, but I think that's due to the fact they already kind of had fast speeds 4 years ago. So, that's on that one. And how we did the data analysis is also detailed in the blog post. Also did the exact same thing for mobile coverage. You get on your phone. This is the exact same thing. What providers were reporting 4 years ago and what they're providing now, and the difference between the speeds. You can kind of tell that in most of Utah, speeds have increased pretty much the same. Those are medium-sized dots, and I think that's due to 4G rolling out. And in some areas, these maps, they only show the difference in speeds of the countries. They don't actually show who has faster and slower speeds. I think it depends on either of those. I think last month's chart and this map show that, broadband infrastructure increased speed, reduced accessibility, so I think a lot of credit goes to how we collect this data is twice a year. The project reaches out to and we did do some checking on our website to verify. Yeah. You know, we did try and look at there hasn't been that many, and especially outside of the Watson Front. Not really enough. We did run a few drives that's kind of like our own speed test over the whole state, and these pretty much showed that mobile providers, are they're reporting so questions come up as we think about later, obviously.
Yeah, so I mean, this map was kind of seeing progress from the beginning. Because sometimes, you don't totally appreciate all of the advances that have happened that companies have invested in the state, and I think it just shows all of the great things. Well, we have a really interesting on the agenda. We have quite a few partners that will be presenting today. So we have the school administration, and then we have UEN, and then we have USDA talking about a programmatic environmental assessment, and then we're also later going to have Chief Burbank come in, who is on the National FirstNet Board, come in and speak a little bit about what's happening with FirstNet. So our next presentation is Institutional Trust Lands Administration. We're very excited to have them here. They're a group that we have not heard from previously. We've heard from other agencies that manage lands in Utah, and I think that they have a really unique footprint in the state, and they also have a very unique way to go about doing all of their permitting. And I think they're a great resource for the stakeholders in doing to reach out to on some siting, so they'll get into it more detail. And then can I remind people on the phone today that we're hearing just a little from the phone, so if you could just hit mute on your phone, that would be great. So let's have Gary and Scott come up.
I'll have Scott go ahead first.
Kelly, this is Sabrina. I just wanted to. It sounds like you were asking folks to mute their phones if they're dialed in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody's on tracks, and also on your end, I can't hardly hear anyone. So we could.
If we have somebody, we'll have people kind of hold the mic while they're presenting. That should help.
Okay. So my name's Scott Bartlett. I'm with the Utah Trust Lands Administration. The full name of the agency, if you're not familiar with it, is really long, so we don't expect people to memorize it, so we just go by SITLA, but it's the School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, and if you break it down, it is just what it sounds like. There are trust lands that we administer for the benefit of schools and state institutions. And just a brief background about trust lands, there were multiple sections throughout the state that were granted for the benefit of schools and public and state institutions at statehood. And those are the properties that we manage. And there are about, remaining of that original grant, there's about 3.4 million acres. And they're across the state. I don't know if we can actually pull up a website. If you go to trustlands.com, we can pull up a map while we're talking here. So my job specifically is easements, and Gary works on the telecommunication sites. And so I do, anytime there's a linear facility, that is what I am in charge of. Let me pull up. We have a really good map, digital plat map. That would so that you can see what our ownership is. This is our official record of ownership. So anywhere you see, the danger of doing this live on a computer you're not familiar with is that it won't work, but it seems to be working just fine here. So anywhere you see blue squares, as you do here, that's our ownership. That's how we map our ownership. Yellow's BLM, white's private, and then et cetera from there, reservation, things like that. And on this map, you can see there's the surface plat map that once you zoom in close enough, you can start to see where the surface encumbrances come in, and those are existing easements and rights of way, and it'll pull up lease sites as well. So anyway, it's quite a useful tool, and I wanted to bring that up first because that's one of the, as far as our website goes, that's one of the first things that people go to. It's really heavily used. It's really useful because you can see what's already there and what ownership we have at a glance without even having to go do title research and things like that. Of course, you want to verify data, but it's the best place to go to find out where trust lands are and what encumbrances are already in place. And so I started to say that we administer trust lands for the benefit of public schools and select other institutions. About 96% of trust lands are for the benefit of public schools. So the revenue that we generate goes to the permanent fund. And it's the interest from that fund that is then distributed annually to public schools on a per pupil basis. And so we don't handle the administration of the money. After it's earned and it goes to the permanent fund to somebody else. But we work to earn revenue from the land. So we're interested in developing them. We're not, we do have the benefit of being able to hold on to land without cost. So if there's a better development plan that might come along, that we feel might come along in the relatively near future, then we might wait to develop a piece of property. But for the most part, if there's there's a beneficial use that we can put to the property, then we're usually interested because it generates revenue for public schools. And if we don't do it now, that's money that does not go into that permanent fund and does not accrue interest. So that's the point, that we're here to make money for mostly public schools. So as far as the easement process goes, again, I'm the easement administrator, and so almost every easement across the state, across trust lands, comes across my desk. So if you've got linear facilities that are outside of a lease footprint, so if you've got a telecommunications site, that's what Gary will talk about. But if you have a linear facility, whether it be for a fiber optic line, telephone line, whatever it is, those are the applications that I process. And we have about a 90-day turnaround on those. We try to keep it simple. We don't have to do, if it's just a state project, we don't have NEPA. What we have is a group called RDCC. The resource, what does that stand for, Gary? I can never remember. It's worse than trying to remember. The Resource Development Coordinating Committee, that if you're not familiar with that, whenever there's a new project on state land, we submit it to that committee, and state agencies as well as federal agencies then see that project and they can make comments. And that's a 30-day period. So instead of you do a NEPA process, we have the 30-day RDCC process. So if there is an issue, say, with wildlife, then DWR would say, hey, there's an issue here, make sure you're aware of that. And that's their opportunity to comment. So it's simplified in that case. And so a new project goes to RDCC for comment. We review it internally, and as long as the project is in the best interest of our beneficiaries, then we accept the application and determine fees and move on from there. So we try to keep it fairly simple. We require for linear projects and for lease sites, we require a surveyed legal description to make sure that the location is accurate, and also to try to avoid any overlaps where we don't want them. As far as fees go, as far as cost goes, terms for easements are typically 30 years, and we have a price schedule. If the occasion warrants, then we will have a piece of property appraised. But most of the time, fees for easements across trust land are determined by price schedule. And if you're part of the Rural Telecom Association, I can't remember what their name is exactly, but if you're part of that, okay, yes, thank you. Then there's a negotiated rate for members of that association of $6 per rod of linear foot. So however many feet long your fiber line is across truss land, divide that by 16.5 to get that many rods, and multiply it by 6, and that's the rental rate. So again, we try to keep that pretty simple. If you're not a member of that group, then there are other rates depending on the width of the easement that you're requesting. And the width, we just like to see whatever's feasible for the construction and continued maintenance of that line. We try to be reasonable there. Trying to think if there's other salient points to the easement program. Does anybody have any questions on that? Yeah.
And so how do you work with your surrounding agencies when people are trying to get across,
Yeah, that's a good question. We have, let me zoom in on maybe the better area than the one I was looking at. As you see there, there's all the blue squares. Some people call it the blue rash. It's everywhere, right? And so, like you said, most projects are not just going to be on trust land. And so if it's a connected action, as in, I'm sure you know what that means, if it crosses federal as well as state property, then of course you have to adhere to the federal process. And we're fine with that. Usually anything you do to comply with the federal regulations is going to satisfy whatever requirements we have. And the most interaction we usually have with, say, the BLM is going to be with cultural resources. And so if there's any BLM property at all, then BLM takes the lead, right? And our archaeologists usually just work with whatever recommendation the BLM archaeologists make. For the most part, we're not bound to. Like if we look at it and say, no, we're not as concerned with this part of it as you are, then we don't have to, but we usually do work pretty well as far as that goes. That's easements. I know they're really interesting. But I'll let Gary, if nobody else has any questions on easements, I'll let Gary talk about telecommunications.
Morning. Good to be here. I would be willing to bet that everybody in this room has either speak about communication. My voice is a little off, but I bet you've communicated on or received data through a tower, through a facility that's on trust lands in Utah. The number of facilities that we've got leased out now is probably about 4 times as many as it was 15 years ago. And part of that reason has been we've been fairly proactive in promoting sites, and then the rest of it is just the advances in technology and what's going on. I remember about 12 years ago, I went to it was kind of a cellular telephone seminar, and they had all the providers there, and we handed out these little pamphlets on and on the front part of it is "We love with a heart communication sites, communication towers." And almost every person we talked to said, "Well, you're not from the government, are you? How can you be from the government and you want towers on you?" Well, towers have got to go different places. We need them. We have to be careful maybe where we place them. But we don't put them just everywhere. There are some places that towers shouldn't be. But we've promoted expansion of the cellular network, and a lot of those have been on trust lands, and then all kinds of other uses. And so from that seminar I went to, we had nearly 10 different leads for sites that resulted of that, because people were really surprised that we were not trying to talk them out of coming on us, but yeah, we would like you to come on trust lands and locate. And so most of our sites statewide are in rural locations. You won't see that many along the Wasatch Front, although there's a lot of public safety and other sites up on Lake Mountain west of Utah Lake. But we have sites on all of the interstates, and they're trying to expand that as we speak, out along I-70 in that area, in what we refer to as that debt. There's been companies working on that for years, and we try to be a partner with companies. We do not build our own sites. We do not manage our own sites. We lease the sites to lessees that build them and manage them. And then we monitor and help administrate and make sure that they're following the terms of the lease and that type of thing. So we are really a partner with the communication industry as much as we can be. And the industry has really changed in the time I started working with it. Initially, it was just single towers for every provider. Now, as you probably know, the trend is more of co-location. Less towers, more tenants on a site. And I think that will be the ongoing trend. And in fact, there probably are going to be sites that will be decommissioned because of co-location and other things like that. But the goal is still to expand, the communication network, not just for cellular, but older radio users, internet service providers. And out in the oil field right now in the Uinta Basin, it's interesting how they're putting in more and more little towers to SCADAs and some of the other sites used to control their facilities from remote locations and to monitor them. And the number of uses for communications are endless, as you all know. And so we try to help promote that. There's numerous different sites. If you've flown in Salt Lake in the airport, then your pilot is probably connected with one of our sites on Lake Mountain. We have a lot of, there are a lot of public safety sites that are used for public safety purposes, not only by police and law enforcement and schools, but also the utility companies, Questar, Rocky Mountain Power. Some of those are very vital, and we're interested in making sure that those sites have the ability to do their job. And interestingly enough, since these sites are on trust lands, some of those public uses, we have to look at ways to help protect that public safety. And like recently up on Lake Mountain, they had some copper wire theft and came in and really on just about every site on that mountain went in and cut the grounding wires, which creates a real problem. And so we are going to be trying to work with users to try to figure out some way additional ways to help protect those sites. But and be a partner and with them, because they're our customers and our partner, and they do well and make money, we do well and make money. And but Scott already talked about some of the things we go through environmentally and the review. We don't just go out one day and decide to put up a communication site. There is a review we go through. And the FCC, at least on cellular sites now, is requiring part of theirs a NEPA review too. It's not required by the state, but by the FCC on some of them. But we try to do whatever it takes to get these sites built if we think it's in the best interest to build a site in a certain location. We have denied putting up sites in certain areas where there's very scenic view sheds and different things where we felt there was a different alternative. But here again, we are here to help the communication site users if we can give them sites. Now, we are building some new towers now, not as many as we were previously, but we are adding new tenants, subtenants on existing towers, and that's ongoing continually. A lot of the ISP providers, there's a lot of them that go on as co-located tenants. And I think most people find out when they go to build a tower, they find out it's way more cost effective to co-locate with somebody. We have tenants that are state of Utah, counties, federal government. So it's not just private entities. And we work with them as well. And so I think that's really all I had to share on that. Any questions on different types of sites and specific questions that I can answer? Well, if not, then I guess I'm done then. It's totally site dependent, and a lot of it will depend on if there's cultural resources, paleontological stuff they have to deal with. We've had towers up within 120 days before. I mean, a lease done within 120 days. And we could have had it done sooner, but we were waiting on the tenant to agree to the lease agreement. But we've had others that took actually years just because of some very technical issues and involvement, and there was involvement with BLM or Forest Service, and we had to deal with all the NEPA regulations. So, you know, it's hard to say, but we try to be as quick as we can. And we've got, as far as co-locating on an existing site, that can happen quite quickly. Sometimes we can have that done within just a few weeks. So there will be more expansion that goes on. A lot of it is with, especially with the cellular companies, is really quite dependent on the budgets they get and where their priority is if they want to expand into rural areas. And they'll continue to do that. Some of it may not all be with towers. Some of it may be with attaching cell transmission equipment onto power poles or anything else, you know. But we're always open to look at sites. So if any of you have potential sites that you think doesn't ever hurt to talk, we can look at it. And if that site doesn't work, we may have ideas on who to co-locate with or whatever. But we can be a good partner for business and public safety too. Yes.
Here's Siri with AT&T. Nice to meet you in person.
Oh,
but,
thanks.
Quick question, and I know Scott talked a little bit about this too, but during the RDCC process, what sort of notifications would you do with the BLM, for example, or do they just sort of have to watch your process? Do they
Well, I believe BLM they're included in that RDC as well, but depending on what it is, typically I'll make contact with them as well, because if we need to get a power line or a road, or there's some impact there, I want them to know what's going on and try to work with them as well. And quite often that can be the case. We do have some sites where we have multiple sites together, such as Lake Mountain, Blue Mountain, Tabby Mountain, and a lot of these are important public safety sites and places where the state systems connect to. But the majority of our sites now are becoming single sites. Build them where they're needed, and like I said, more and more co-location going on. I have a handout I'll send around so you can got my information on it and some general information there. But we're always willing to see if we can help in some way. So, nothing else. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And we definitely would love for you guys to come back and attend future meetings. And I think as needs arise, the providers will know who are their contact people for some of these issues, which I think is really important. Let's go next. To the Utah Education Network. They have actually some really exciting updates. They have a few great announcements for us. And I don't know if Dennis wants to take the lead or Sabrina wants to start. Let me give you the microphone.
I can start and then have Sabrina give us an update on the recent FCC meeting and some of the changes coming along the road for the E-rate program. Ray asked me to give you all a report on the governor's budget for UEN that was released last week. And so we were pleasantly surprised that the governor has recommended $4.5 million of new ongoing funding for UEN this coming fiscal year, as well as about $6.2 million in one-time money for equipment replacement in our network. Ray couldn't be here today. He's working on some new legislation with two sponsors, Senator Howard Stevenson and I'm trying to think, the Representative Gibson, on the technology initiative. We think that will be coming this session for sure, and will have significant impact on technology in the classroom and UEN's network, the next several years. Rick Gaisford and Kathy Webb have been leading an effort at the State Office of Education with technology directors and superintendents around the state, helping to plan some of the new pieces of that legislation. And I think Ray will be able to give a report the next meeting, Kelly, more on that. So the exciting news we had to share with you this time is UEN was awarded a USDA RUS Distance Learning and Telemedicine grant. We worked tirelessly over the summer. I mean, we only had, I think, 30 days for the entire program. Typically, those grants, when they come out, we have at least 60. I think this time, when the grant was released, we had 30 days to get our application in. One of the great opportunities, we think, for the program is to work with the Goshute tribe. And Elvira Murphy, who is their education director, helped coordinate with us on the grant. UEN will be able to install a first-time distance learning classroom out on the Goshute tribe reservation. And they're working with Salt Lake Community College and some of the other colleges to be able to deliver programs out to the Goshute tribe. So we're really excited about that. Other thing, Kelly, I did send you a map in your email. If you want to pull it up, I could show folks of what schools were affected in the grant. There were 46 current locations in UEN's distance learning network. And it's just a PDF file. The total amount of funding that we received from the USDA grant was $469,000, and UEN matched, I think, at about 105% to be competitive. We're very fortunate, and we've heard that there were other applications in from Utah, and we were the only one, I think, this year that were funded for the DLT program. So you can see it will have a really good impact around the state in terms of, and this will allow us to install new technology with HD video conferencing equipment to 46 rural schools around the state, replacing a lot of old codecs and equipment that have been in place for really over 10 years in some cases. So we're very excited to do this. We're going to begin the project in January. We anticipate it will probably take about a year and a half to complete. It affects almost, as you can see, almost every rural county in the state in terms of distance learning technology. So really great opportunity. And then if anybody has any questions on the grant or legislation or things going on right now, Sabrina's going to give us an update on the recent FCC meeting last week on December 11th in terms of what there's some exciting developments for us on the E-rate program as well. So Sabrina, do you want to give a report on that?
You bet. Yeah, it was equally exciting, I suppose, meeting last week with the FCC. They voted on the second E-rate modernization order, and it passed. Some of the highlights in this second order, one I should also mention, they also issued an order on reconsideration, which was equally exciting for us. Some of the highlights of the second order are increase in the E-rate annual funding cap. They added $1.5 billion annually to the cap to now make that a $3.9 billion annual cap. That would be available for both Category 1 leased services and Category 2 internal connections and basic maintenance. Plus, there's for funding years 2015 through 2019, there's an additional $1 billion set aside to fund what most people refer to as the Wi-Fi initiative, but really it's applicable to all internal connections as well. So one of the other changes they made in the July order was to make it possible for smaller entities who don't have IT resources to lease a managed internal broadband service. So that was a significant change. The major exciting news that for us regarding the order on reconsideration was a granting of our request to revisit the urban-rural classification methodologies. And though we haven't actually seen the written order yet, it appears that the cutoff now for an urban classification is populations of 25,000 or more within those urban clusters. In the initial order, they basically threw all urban clusters under the urban definition, and that lowered the population cutoff to 2,500, which was not reasonable in our opinion. So they've set that threshold now at 25,000 population, which is wonderful news for us and most rural states. The other significant thing they did was to more than double the 5-year budget cap calculation for urbanized area libraries. So for urban libraries, their Cat 2 budget cap is now calculated at $5 per square foot versus the $2.30 per square foot that was in the July order. There's another thing I should mention here that is still very, well, ambiguous, shall we say, but I'm convinced that it will be significant for UEN because we're a state entity, and some of our funding may qualify as state match, which would help us to better cover the costs for capital infrastructure construction costs. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out. I think I mentioned also they added I already mentioned that, the Cat 2 $1 billion per year funding. So I guess those are some of the highlights. I'll ask Melinda if she wants to add anything further. I realize we're kind of on a bit of a time crunch here, but as far as we're concerned, those are the major points coming about in this second order and the order on reconsideration. So we're happy to see those changes and gearing up for the application filing window, which should open early January and close sometime late March this year. But it will be a completely new ball game with new forms, new data collection requirements, new enrollment and NSLP reporting requirements for us. So we're conducting almost weekly webinars now for our E-rate applicants across the state to help bring them up to speed. And hopefully we'll all be well prepared for the filing window when it does open in January. Melinda?